Hi, my name's Tony Morrow, and this is Introduction to Project Management. The last episode was a big one, where we planned our schedule. Today, it's all about the money, as we talk about cost. Spoiler alert, there will be math. Well, actually, that's not true. We won't be using math today, but there are several formulas that project managers use in determining and monitoring the cost of a project. In this course, we won't dive too deeply into those, but in future courses, we will cover them in greater detail. The PMBOK defines project cost management as the processes involved in planning, estimating, budgeting, financing, funding, managing, and controlling costs so the project can be completed within the approved budget. Like I said, it's about the money. Remember that over a third of projects didn't come in on budget. So in order to start off on the right foot, or by the left foot if you're in the Army, we need to plan how we are going to manage these costs. You'll recall we did this already with scope and schedule. Plan cost management is defined as the process of defining how the project costs will be estimated, budgeted, managed, monitored, and controlled. In order to start this, we'll need some trusty inputs, such as the schedule management plan and the risk management plan. We'll be covering risk in a future episode, but suffice it to say we don't have the risk management plan yet. So you may need to revisit your cost management plan and budget after you've identified your risks. Of course, no inputs conversation would be complete without our BFFs, Fs, and OPAs. Armed with some expert judgment, data analysis, perhaps funding approaches like self-funding, funding with equity or with debt, and meeting with stakeholders, the project team, sponsor, or anyone with responsibility for project costs, you can now come up with the plan. As we discussed with schedule, the level of detail is important to consider. What level of accuracy or precision will you use? Are the numbers rounded to the nearest 100, 1,000, or million? What unit of measure are you using? Canadian dollars, US dollars, hours, days, or weeks? What are your controlled variance thresholds? When will you need to take action? What are your reporting formats and how often? Annually, quarterly, or monthly? And how will you measure performance? This gets into earned value management. So we'll take a moment to describe this. Picture a graph where time runs horizontally and cumulative dollar amounts run vertically. Once we've completed our budgeting process here in a few moments, we'll have established our cost baseline. This is the approved version of our time and phased project budget, excluding any management reserves, which can be changed only through formal change control procedures and is used as a basis for comparison to actual results. This line, running from the bottom left to the upper right, ends at the planned completion of the project. This point is the budgeted amount at completion, or BAC. Above the cost baseline is what may look like steps. These are staged funding requirements that usually align with project milestones. When calculating your budget, there are several components that make up the project budget. The first is estimated activity cost, or the total cost of our activities on the activity list from last episode. Add onto this a contingency amount. This can be estimated using the worst case scenario from the 3-point estimating process, PERT, or a historical amount based on the impacts of labor, resources, or the environment. This total of the activity cost estimates and contingency make up our work package cost estimate. Remember, the work packages are the lowest level broken down in the WBS, and the activities combine their outputs to provide the deliverables of each work package. In my coffee example from last episode, my coffee grinds from grinding, measuring and filling the grinds in the filter, and brewing the coffee to caffeinated perfection are all activities that combine to produce my deliverable, my cup of coffee. The work package cost estimate then calculates a reserve, about 10 to 15%, or other historically relevant number, or otherwise calculated using the worst case estimates from PERT or the 3-point analysis. Combine these two and you have control accounts, or for our purposes, the cost baseline. This terminates at the end of the project with BAC. This baseline is a reference point or control point where scope, budget, actual cost, and schedule are compared to earned value for performance measurement. Management reserves is defined as the amount of project budget or schedule held outside of the performance management baseline. For management control purposes, that is reserved for unforeseen work that is within the scope of the project. These are the classic unknown unknowns. Some might think of 2020 that way. Usually controlled by the sponsor, these reserve funds are outside the direct control of the project manager. Combine these reserves with the cost baseline and you have the total project budget. You might want to review this one more time as we will be building on these concepts in a later episode when we discuss controlling costs. For now, let's return to estimating costs. At this point, we've completed the framework of our cost management plan. We have our scope baseline, and we'll need to consider our quality management plan. Quality is our next lesson, so we may have to revisit our budget later. In addition, we will need our lessons learned, project schedule, resource requirements, and risk register. These last two can be populated from our charter or otherwise revisited after our risk and resource management episodes. Lastly, our collection of inputs would not be complete without our best buds, Fs and OPAs. With these resources in hand, we return to our expert judgment, our various estimating methods, analogous, parametric, bottom-up, 3-point, and PERT, and data analysis. Part of our analysis is alternative analysis, a method of integrating assumptions and investigating alternative tools, methods, and techniques, or resources that could impact the project. Reserve analysis, an estimation of contingency reserves if various risk factors materialize. And cost of quality, or what is the estimated impact of conforming to quality standards or not. Using various tools such as different project management information systems, these estimates can be modeled and forecast for better decision making. Once complete, a quantitative assessment of probable costs and contingencies can be estimated. In support of the estimates, you may have some supporting documents, such as a list of constraints, a list of assumptions, documented known risks, an indicated range and or a level of confidence of the final estimate, and the basis of how you came up with the estimate. Estimates are done. Now it's time to determine our budget and baseline. In addition to our previous inputs from the estimate, we'll add our resource management plan, something we don't have yet, as well as our business case. Remember, that went into our charter, as well as our current agreements or contracts for services and materials. Combining our references with expert judgment, data analysis with an emphasis on any historical data or models that could make the budget more accurate, and any financial constraints either by financing or spending caps, we will generate the cost baseline and total project funding requirements, or the steps in our graph. In today's episode, we planned our cost management, estimated costs, and determined our budget. We defined cost management, planned cost management, cost baseline, budget at completion, and management reserves. And we discussed and introduced earned value management, which we will explore further in the controlling cost episode. We are about halfway through the meat of this burger and the planning process group. In the next episode, we'll begin to finish off planning with quality.